Hey, welcome back to this week's Primer Podcast. I'm Pete Stearns. I'm here with Jessica Flake, and we are wrapping up our series on difficult people. Over the course of this series, we've been looking at the story of Jacob and Esau and really been reflecting on their relationship with one another and recognizing how oftentimes we engage in relationships that are marked by some of that same strain and that same tension and that same difficulty. Now, one of the things that I hope has been evident over the course of this series is the tension that Jacob is feeling. Jacob is feeling this tension between a birthright and a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this birthright is this blessing that's given by God to Abraham, that's passed from Abraham to Isaac, and that Isaac intends to pass to Esau, but that Esau doesn't care about this birthright.
Right.
And so he gives this birthright up of his own volition to Jacob, right? So Jacob has acquired this birthright. He has acquired this responsibility. He's hungry to be this blessing unto all of the nations. But then we see this other blessing, right? This blessing that is not given by God, but instead the blessing that's given instead by Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And this blessing is a blessing that's marked by earthly power.
Mm-hmm.
It's marked by earthly reward and earthly wealth, the multiplication of livestock and influence and these kind of things. And Jacob has acquired this blessing, not rightfully, but instead deceitfully,
Yeah,
right? He's stolen this. He's tricked
Mm-hmm.
Isaac in that space. And so we have this push and this pull, this tension that's going to impact all of his relationships. It's a tension that I think you and I feel too. It's this tension between what God wants for us and what the world invites us into, right? And we're living asking this question, where is my identity? And all of that's going to come to a head here in this final story as we look at Jacob and Esau kind of reuniting together.
Yeah. So I know last week we left off with Rebecca and Jacob coming up with this plan to trick Isaac, and then Rebecca hears that Esau is very angry and is planning to kill Jacob after Isaac has passed.
Yeah.
And so Jacob's left and went to live with
Laban,
which is Rebecca's brother. And so like I instead of them going and having a conversation, he just leaves and flees.
Yes, please.
And I wonder, like, what is it about our human nature that one makes us want to flee when there's a conflict?
Yeah.
And then two, that there's this fear of the worst.
Yeah.
Like, why do we assume the worst in people?
Yeah, and I mean, in this case, you probably say he assumes the worst because he heard the worst,
True,
right?
that's true.
But we're going to see this week that's kind of flipped on his head, right? Where Jacob instead hears this invitation to come home.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that in order to do that, he's got to mend things with his brother. And so he sends messengers in front of him to his brother. And the messengers come back. They haven't been hurt. They haven't been injured. They haven't been threatened. And they just tell him, hey, your brother's coming to meet you. And he's bringing 400 men with you.
Yeah.
And Jacob's response is just what you said. It's to assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And so he makes in his head now, even though there's no indication of this, that 22 years later, he's drawn right back into that same fear, my brother's going to kill me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it says in verse 7 in chapter 32, in fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's assumed the worst, and then he has responded to his own assumption. Right? So he's built this fear in his head that's built out of his assumption. And I think you're right, is that we in our human nature are wired to be either fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
when we have fear. So this fear is being produced from an assumption, and now he's naturally reacting to the fear that's not based in reality. And I think that's why assumption can be so dangerous, because fear does this stuff to us. Like I remember this story. I had this sweet little 6th grade boy, and at camp, he would always go to bed early, right? Every middle schooler stays up as late as they possibly can. But during the evening snack shop time, he would go to bed. It'd be like 9 o'clock at night. Kids got another hour to be out, and he goes back and he'd lay down in his bunk. And so this 8th grade boy thought it would be funny to like startle him or scare him. So he sneaks up outside of the cabin and he jumps up in the window, and his window is right in this little 6th grade boy's face as he's sleeping there. And he jumps up into his face, and this 6th grade boy is terrified. And like in one breath, he just swings his fist with all of his might. He punches straight through the glass window. It shatters in this 8th grade boy's face. The 8th grade boy was okay. The other boy was okay. We did have to go get some stitches at the hospital. Mm-hmm. But it was like this immediate reaction to fear was to fight, mm-hmm. right? Was to protect. And then on the other hand, there's so many times where our immediate reaction to fear is flight. Mm-hmm. Like I talk about how the thing I'm most afraid of more than anything else is not bears, it's not snakes. It's a text message that says, "Do you have a minute to talk?" Right? Yeah. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this going to mean? Like, what did I do? Yeah. And this insecurity is like this flight insecurity, mm-hmm. right? And I think sometimes our response, like in flight, we are turning fear to insecurity. And in fight, we're turning fear to bitterness and anger and defensiveness. Mm-hmm. And so I think we see that in the story of Jacob, but we see this personally in ourselves as well. I don't know if you've experienced any of that in your life or those assumptions and those kind of things, but
yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of times when I'm a little busy, I tend to like go by somebody really quick.
Yeah,
and they're a few times I've had a text that says, "You mad at me? Or are you okay?" And in reality, I'm just focused. I'm saying hey to them, but yet they're immediately thinking that I'm mad at them because I didn't stop and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And in my thought, like I'm not even thinking about a conversation at that point. I'm just thinking of saying hey and heading on to my next thing that I need to do. But I've done it in the opposite. I've been the one that thought, somebody walked by my office and normally they come in and say hey to me for a little while but yet they just walk past. And so it is immediate, like, okay, what did I do today?
Right.
What was it that made them decide not to speak to me? We always tend to say it's me. It's about me. It's but yet we forget.
I think that's the flight reaction.
Is it?
So the flight reaction to me, and I'm not a psychologist, I don't know these things, but the flight reaction to me is, what have I done? Mm. Like I'm afraid, and it begins to wreck my life.
Yeah.
I think the other side says it couldn't possibly be about me. Mm. So there's this fight mentality, right? That justifies our anger towards somebody else. So Brené Brown is a renowned psychologist and author and the whole 9 yards, but she did this study for this book, Rising Strong, and she surveyed people, and it was a simple question was, do you believe that people are doing the very best that they can with what they have? Like in general, do they believe it? So first, Jessica, do you believe that people in general, you just think across the board, people that cut you off in traffic, people that yell mean things on the sideline of kids' youth sports, people that are, honking, I don't know, you bump into the grocery store, are those people doing the very best that they possibly can with what they have?
So I will say, like, it's the benefit of the doubt type of thing, right?
Okay.
So, like, what my thought is. A lot of times I give it more freely to people that I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
As well.
Yeah, I feel that too.
And so, like, the waitress at the, the diner that they're eating at. And, a lot of times, I shouldn't say this because I usually talk very positive about Joey, but sometimes, sometimes he's not the greatest tipper, especially if somebody is. Sometimes he, if the waitress or waiter is not as in like attending to us, he'll be like, they don't need a 20% tip, right. And I'm always like, well, what? Like, we don't know what they're going through.
Yeah, what's happening.
We don't know if they're waiting on every single table in this restaurant.
So there's almost the unknown forms for you, like you're empathizing for them.
Yeah.
But then I feel on the other side, when I do know, I'm like, well, they have no reason to act that way. And I convince myself that I know this other person perfectly.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, also, I don't know what I would answer this question to be, right? There's certainly times where I will say people are doing the best that they can. And then there are times that I don't feel that way. And that, Brené Brown says basically it's a mixed bag, right? Mm-hmm. People are on both sides. And most of the time, people defend the belief that people aren't doing the best that they can by saying, I'm not doing the best with what I have, right?
Right.
I know that I'm not doing my very best. But she asked her husband the same question, and his response is profound. And I think his response is something that we as believers should cling to. So he says it here in her book on page 113. I don't know. I really don't. All I know is that my life is better when I assume that people are doing their best.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps me out of judgment and lets me focus on what is and not what should or could be. And I just find that so interesting, where it says it doesn't matter if your assumption is correct or it's incorrect.
Yeah.
Choosing to believe otherwise is going to frame your behaviors differently.
Mm-hmm.
Choosing to assume the best, even if it's wrong, is going to frame the relationship more positively for you, and it's going to allow you to release that tendency to enter into judgment. And I just think that's such a beautiful thought there.
I read something yesterday that said it's better to live your life assuming the best in others and being let down from on occasion, than to live in suspicion of others for your whole life. And so I thought, that's very interesting and way to put it. I've never thought of suspicion, but like if you're not thinking the best and you're thinking the worst, you're suspicious of that person to do a wrong towards you or whatever. So it's interesting to think of it in that way.
Well, I think it is. It's like, but it requires such a faith maturity, right? It's like I think that I practice assuming the best in others often.
Yeah.
But not always.
Yeah. It's
like maybe it's a 50-50 bag. Maybe it's less than that. But then I know people where I'm like, man, that person, it just seems like they give somebody the benefit of the doubt every single time. And it's led me to this place of looking back at the story of Jacob and Esau and looking at this wrestling thing. And there's this neat story that's super strange, and we talked about it on Sunday, so I won't dive all the way into it today. But Jacob is wrestling with God. And the main punchline of this story, as a kid, I always was like, Jacob beat God, right? Jacob's not even the strongest person in his family, right? He's the one playing video games. Yeah, he's not defeating God in this moment, right? But what it does say is that he refuses to let go of God, right? So he's in the midst of this crisis moment, this fear for his life, when he's been torn between the promises of man and the promises of God. And in that very moment, it says he wrestles with God and he refuses to let go. He's literally clinging to God for his life. He's chosen. My identity is in my God. And he's given this new name. And it says, your name's no longer Jacob, which is usurper, deceiver, the heel grabber. Instead, your name is Israel, because you struggle with God and humans and have overcome. And I like to think that struggle with God and human, they're not separated events. It's saying you had a struggle between what the world had to offer and what God had to offer, and you overcame. And you chose rightly. Yeah. And look at how that's going to change his response to Jacob and to Esau. So Esau comes and greets him and hugs him and embraces him, and there's this powerful moment. And of course, none of his assumptions, none of his fears were founded. Jacob sent all of these gifts and all of these flocks to him. And Esau asked, what's the meaning of all these flocks and herds I met? And Jacob says, to find favor in the eyes, my Lord, or in favor in your eyes, my Lord, he said. But Esau said, I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. No, please, said Jacob. If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Now you have received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all that I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. And I love, there's a rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, who says, in this statement, Jacob is returning the blessing that he stole from Esau.
Yeah.
And as he returns the blessing, the reason for his returning of this earthly blessing is because in God, he has all that he needs. And I think if we're to assume the best of others, it's to win that internal wrestling that we have between God and man, and saying, do I fully believe that in God I have all that I need? And if the answer is no, if we're in turmoil, we're going to still have those moments where we think the worst of others.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, because we're wrestling, we're going to have moments where we think the best. But it's like as we grow more confident in that wrestling, as we come closer to clinging to God with all that we have, as we let go less, we will be more frequent to assume the best, to be in redemptive relationships and to lower those barriers for us. So,
yeah, that sounds great. And hopefully you guys are able to just plug into your groups and figure out the what it is that makes you feel like sometimes you think the worst of people. And we'll see you soon.
I hope we do some outtakes this time. The story of Jacob and Esau. Okay, start. Hey, give me that pillow. Okay. I hate sitting without this pillow.
I was gonna say it feels weird right here.
Right as I took the breath to like say, hey, I like, when that spit like hits you in the back of the throat, and it was like, oh boy, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Well, hey, welcome to this week's Primer Pop.
That was so bad.
All right, we're ready now. Oh, I just did it again. Okay.
Yes, I am like, okay, these are going to be some good outtakes.